Ah, dancing. There's something both liberating and revealing about the act. Even if you're stiff or shy or have two left feet, the dance floor can be a place to cut loose and show at least a little of your unrestrained self. For teenagers especially, moving and grooving can create the rare, unguarded moment. Freaks and Geeks, the cult classic series about 80s teens finding themselves, understood that idea better than any other show. With the series recently arriving on Hulu, there's no better way to revisit the show's characters and perspective than through the times our favorite group of young adults, of both the freaky and geeky variety, decided to bust a move. Here are the 6 dance-tastic moments that defined this underseen but well-loved series. Number 6. Sam's moves in the mirror. Fancy footwork, disco pointing, and plenty of ows are all on the table here, as young Sam Weir fantasizes about chatting up his crush in his Parisian night suit. One of the key features of Freaks and Geeks is that it never smoothed over or shied away from the abject awkwardness of our teenage years. Sam's dance is cringy, but in the best way, an exuberant, if diluted, moment of hopeful fantasy that we all let ourselves indulge in from time to time. What's more, it's funny, as this spindly dork imagines that his collared onesie and his best approximation of James Brown will win the heart of the girl he so admires. But it's also an honest scene, centered on the unpolished moments of young adulthood that are normally scrubbed away from our television screens, and it revels in the way we can let ourselves get carried away, if only in the privacy of our own bedrooms. Number 5. Lindsay's Grateful Dead Jam. Speaking of bedroom bops, big sister Lindsay Weir's dance is a much slower and more gradual one. Her mellow jive to the Grateful Dead's Box of Rain isn't just one of the series' best needle drops, it's also a sharp way to show her embracing her own freedom and self-identity. So much of Freaks and Geeks features Lindsay pulled between her good girl roots and the rebels set against them. But here, she can enjoy a private moment where she discovers something that speaks to her. This liberating dance represents the slow but steady ways in which Lindsay charts her own path over the course of the show's 18 episodes. She casts off both her good kid bona fides and the judgments of the local misfits and learns to follow what moves her, no matter who approves. Number 4. Nick's angry disco routine. One of those misfits is Lindsay's ex, Nick Andopoulos, who has to take the floor in a disco dance competition right after a tough conversation with her. Unlike most other teen shows, romantic relationships were never the main focus of Freaks and Geeks. But when it went there, the series made them thornier and realer than TV normally allows for. Lindsay cares for Nick, but realizes this sweet goofball who admires her might not be right for her, or going anywhere for that matter. And yet, when they break up, she feels jealous after his new girlfriend seems to be able to get his life on track. Their connection doesn't devolve into a love triangle, but it makes these teens' feelings for one another more complicated and fraught than a soapy drama might allow for. Fortunately or unfortunately, those feelings are in the back of Nick's mind when he's called upon to do his best John Travolta impression. Number 3. Bill's Sexy Dance. Nick's case of Saturday Night Dance fever is still more successful than Geeky Bill's flailing, rhythm-challenged efforts to show off how to quote-unquote dance sexy. One of the things Freaks and Geeks captured better than almost any other show is the type of schoolyard wisdom passed around by clueless kids. Sam and Neil dismiss Bill's claim that women love it when you show off the moves like this, but his dogged insistence faithfully represents the way teenagers can seize on some assumed truth about the universe, share it with their best friends, and treat it like the gospel. More often than not, these supposed truths are misguided at best, but that never stops them from being traded around, treated as vital bits of knowledge, and occasionally even turned into loopy dances. Number 2. Mr. and Mrs. Weir's Buddy Rich Boogie. It doesn't get loopier than mom and dad busting a move though, as Mr. and Mrs. Weir boogie down with their daughter's ex to the percussive stylings of Buddy Rich. Freaks and Geeks usually rested its focus on the kids, but parents' involvement typically takes the form of amusing but empty warnings that any mildly dangerous activity will result in immediate death. But in a handful of episodes, the show took time out to remember that Mr. and Mrs. Weir were people too, in their embrace and care for Nick, and in moments of softness and understanding for their own kids. The series was never about the adults and often made them a source of humor, but it also let them get in on the act from time to time, both in their living room dances and in staying a meaningful part of their children's lives. Number 1. Come Sail Away at Homecoming. Those lives get a little more interesting when Sam finally musters up the courage to ask his crush to dance. And his bravery inspires Lindsay to ask a boy she'd embarrassed earlier if he'd like to do the same. Freaks and Geeks included tons of moments of awkwardness and struggle and insecurity. The strength of the show is that it near perfectly captured the genuine rockiness of those early years, when we're all still figuring out not just who we are, but who we want to be. But what keeps it so vibrant and memorable all these years later is how it would also deliver those small moments of empathy and triumph. Sam could rock out with his crush, Lindsay could show kindness to someone she'd hurt, and slowly but surely, both of them could figure out how to grow up on their own terms, if only one episode at a time.